A man called Elijah. Dear friends, in the previous story, we saw the kings who came to power in the divided kingdom of Israel after Solomon, and how they reigned, right? In the 30th year of the reign of Asa, king of Judah, Ahab, son of Omri, became king in Israel. In today's story, we will look at Ahab's reign and about a prophet who lived in that time called Elijah. By this time, all the kings of Israel had provoked God to anger more than the ones before them, which is why, when God poured out his wrath, Baasha killed all the family of Jeroboam, and when Baasha continued in the same sin, Zimri killed all the family of Baasha. Within this time period, people from 4 different families had become king over Israel. Now Ahab, son of Omri, became king. He too walked in the ways of his father and provoked God. And as if walking in the sins of his predecessors were not enough, he took Jezebel, daughter of Ethbaal, king of Sidon, as his wife, and served Baal and worshipped him. He made an altar for Baal in Samaria, capital of Israel, and made an Asherah pole. Ahab did more to anger the Lord, the God of Israel, than all the kings of Israel before him. Ahab's sin affected not only the people of Israel but also the land. While God gave the Israelites commandments through Moses, he said that if they forsake him, he will make the sky over their head bronze and the ground beneath them iron. Now, while the Israelites made that very mistake, God sent Elijah the Tishbite to Ahab. Elijah said to Ahab, "As the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years except at my word." Then he went back, and as per God's command, he hid in the Kerith ravine, east of the Jordan. There God commanded a raven to give Elijah food. Thus Elijah ate the bread and meat the raven brought, and drank water from the brook, and lived there. However, due to lack of rain, the water in the brook dried up. Following that, God commanded Elijah to go from there to Zarephath, to the north of Israel. There God had commanded a widow to feed him. Thus Elijah went from the Kerith ravine to Zarephath. When he reached the city gate, he saw a widow gathering sticks. He called her and asked for water. When she went to get that, he asked for a piece of bread too. But all that she had was a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. She told the truth to Elijah, but Elijah comforted her and told her to make him a little cake of it first, then to make some for herself and her son from what is left. He also told her that until the Lord sends rain on the earth, the jar of flour will not be spent and the jug of oil will not run out. She believed and did as Elijah said to her. And she, he, and her house ate for many days. Her flour and oil did not run out. And Elijah lived in the upper room of her house. Following that, one day the widow's son fell sick and died. By this time she had come to understand who God was, and that he cannot get along with sin. Which may be why, when her son died, she remembered her sin, and in her grief blamed Elijah. Elijah, who knew that God is a God of mercy and does not show partiality, and gives comfort and salvation to everyone, took the child up to his room. He laid him on his bed and prayed to God for his life to come into him again. And the Lord listened to the voice of Elijah, and the life of the child came into him again, and he revived. And Elijah took the boy back to his mother. That gave the woman an assurance of who the God of Elijah is. Thus she, a Sidonian woman, came to know the true God. Everyone in Israel was struggling due to lack of rain. Even the king's house was affected by famine. King Ahab called Obadiah, who was over the household, and told him to go through the land to all the springs of water and all the valleys, to see if they may find grass to keep the horses and mules alive. Ahab went in one direction and Obadiah went in another direction. By this time the famine had lasted 3 years, and God talked to Elijah and said, "Go, show yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain upon the earth." And as he was on his way, he met Obadiah. Now Obadiah feared the Lord greatly, and he recognized Elijah and welcomed him. He told Obadiah to inform Ahab of his presence. This, however, frightened him, because there was no nation or kingdom where Ahab had not sought Elijah. And Obadiah feared that if he tells Ahab that Elijah was here, and Ahab doesn't find him, he will be killed. But Elijah assured Obadiah that he will surely show himself to Ahab, and nothing will happen as he fears. Obadiah trusted Elijah and informed Ahab. Ahab came to meet Elijah. During those days, the Israelites knew that prophets were sent by God. So the prophets had the right to go anywhere at any time, even into the king's palace. When Elijah saw Ahab, he told him to gather all the Israelites, the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah, and come up to Mount Carmel. Ahab did so. Then Elijah talked to the Israelites first. He said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." But the people who were confused said nothing. Elijah set a challenge to bring the people back to God. He asked for 2 bulls, one for Elijah to sacrifice to the Lord, and the other for Baal's prophets to sacrifice to Baal. But neither were to set fire to it. The God who answers by fire, he is God. The people felt that this was good. Elijah gave the first chance to Baal's prophets. So they took the bull and prepared it. They called on the name of Baal from morning to noon, but there was no response or answer. At noon they shouted louder and slashed themselves with sword and spears until their blood flowed. Then Elijah called all the people to himself. He repaired the altar of the Lord which had been torn down. He dug a large trench around it. Then he arranged the wood on the altar, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he told them to fill 4 large jars with water, and pour it on the offering twice. Then he told them to do it a 3rd time. This time the water ran down the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed. As soon as he finished praying, the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and acknowledged that the Lord was God. On Elijah's command, they seized the prophets of Baal. Elijah brought them down to the brook of Kishon and slaughtered them there. And Elijah said to Ahab, "Go up, eat and drink, for there is a sound of rain." But Elijah went up to the top of Mount Carmel and bowed himself down on the earth and prayed. Then he told his servant to go up and look towards the sea, to see if there's any indication of rain. But there was nothing. This repeated 7 times. The 7th time the servant saw a little cloud, like a man's hand, rising from the sea. Soon the sky grew black with clouds, and there was a great rain. And Ahab got on his chariot and went down to Jezreel. And the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he gathered up his garment and ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. Upon returning to the palace, Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, "So may the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow." On hearing this, Elijah's faith wavered a little. Then he arose and ran for his life, and came to Beersheba, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, sat down under a tree, and wished that he might die. Then he lay down there and slept. And an angel touched him and said to him, "Arise and eat." And he looked, and at his head was a cake and a jar of water. He ate that and lay down again. The angel came down a second time with food and woke him up, and told him that he would have to make a great journey. And he arose and ate and drank, and went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mountain of God. There he came to a cave and lodged in it. There the word of God came to Elijah. When Elijah heard the still small voice of God, he went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And Elijah told God how the people of Israel had forsaken the Lord, and how they killed all the prophets of God. He added that he is the only one left, and that they seek his life too. But what God gave to Elijah, who was scared, was even more responsibility. God also corrected Elijah's misconception. He said that Elijah wasn't the only one who followed God, but that there were 7,000 in all Israel who hadn't worshipped Baal. We will see what responsibility God gave Elijah and if he fulfilled them or not in the next story. God bless you.